it's a little terrifying because you absolutely cannot miss.
Goalies now are completely at a premium.
Not, right? Like, Canada doesn't have a ton of great options.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Hockey News Big Show. I'm your host, Katie Gaus, joined by Michael Traikos and Ryan Kennedy. And guys, it is Friday, so that means it is time for another installment of our Top 8 Contender segment. So obviously, we've talked about this now every Friday until the end of the regular season. We're going to see who you guys think are the true contenders, not just the hot teams. So let's get into it. And again, honest and interesting, I get the email with the lists for both of you. So they are a little different. We want to make sure you guys are being honest and not getting peer pressured by each other. But let's kick things off this week by starting with Michael's list. And I want to dive into your bottom four to start. So you've got at your bottom four, Washington in number 8, Carolina at 7, Winnipeg at 6, and then Vegas in that 5th spot. So talk to me a little bit about this. Who's in, who's out? Because obviously there are some changes.
Yeah, I want to preface this by saying this was really hard. Okay. And I thought coming up with 8 teams would be easy. Like, had you made me come up with 4, I would have thought that was difficult. But even 8, oh my God, I'm leaving off some really good teams. And I'm probably going to change my list constantly. I know you're saying that it's not the hottest team, but I get swayed by recency bias a lot. So, Washington, I didn't have in last week's top 8. I'm still kind of torn on Washington. I still think they're a bit of a fraud. I don't like their centers. I don't think they have the centers to kind of go deep in the playoffs. All the credit to Dylan Strome and Pierre-Luc Dubois, but I still don't think that they're, a number 1 or even a number 2 center when I'm looking at who they're up against. And their defense, I'm not sold on. I think they really get carried by Logan Thompson. They get carried by obviously Alex Ovechkin, and they're doing a great job, but I've got them on 8. They're kind of on the borderline. Carolina, I don't think. I'm trying to remember if I had them last week. They were kind of on my bubble.
Bumped them off.
I bumped them off. Okay,
yeah.
And I'm bumping them back on right now because they're on a heater. And I don't know why I didn't feel good about Carolina. Like, how do you not like Rod Brind'Amour as a coach? So those are my 2 big changes. Vegas and Winnipeg, I think I might have just swapped their spots. But again, that has more to do with Vegas being in a Pacific division where I'm not a huge believer of LA or Edmonton or the wildcard team that's going to get in there. So in Winnipeg, it's just, they drop down because Colorado and Dallas are just so good. So, someone has to kind of falter.
All right. Well, let's see what Ryan has to say, because Ryan, your bottom 4 were Toronto at 8, Edmonton at 7, Vegas at 6, and Winnipeg at 5. So
Ryan, Toronto. You live in Toronto, my friend.
Oh,
I do. And I will say, I think that Toronto will rise in my rankings probably next week. They are starting to play better. They sort of hit a little speed bump there. Yeah. There was questions about, do they have the offense in the playoffs? Now they have the goaltending and the defense, but a couple of important wins for them. I think beating the Rangers was really big, especially because that game meant more to the Rangers in the grand scheme of things. So I can see them going up. But I'm still at the point where I would really like to see the Leafs get that division title, because then they play a wild card team. But then on the other hand, that wild card team could be Ottawa, who they have not beat this year. So, there's a lot sort of going on with the Leafs. With Edmonton, and, I know we'll talk about this later, but, Draisaitl's banged up. McDavid left the game last night. Skinner, it was probably a concussion protocol pull. But, they're kind of going through it, and they would have a tough path either way. Vegas, same deal. Like, they're going to have to play some really good teams right away. And then Winnipeg, I'm starting to actually, warm up on more, where it's sort of like maybe they are just good. Like, I know they have their non-believers, but at some point you got to just say, they keep winning. And I wonder if we're sleeping on the Jets in a weird way, even though they're first in their division by a country mile.
The way you feel about Winnipeg is how I feel about Washington.
Yeah. But here's the thing. And I have truthfully, for a little while now. I was on NHL Network Radio earlier this week, and one of the questions they were potentially going to ask me, so I did some research, was who is my Stanley Cup pick? And honestly, like, I went through it all, and I was like, I don't know what it is. I really feel something about Winnipeg. And I think maybe it's because I got to witness firsthand the way that they lost last year and what happened to them in that first round series against Colorado. And I just feel like this is a team that learned so much. And they've shown us that throughout the course of this whole season with their consistency. I don't see them making the same mistakes twice. And that's why I think that they are going to be able to win some big games, because I think they learned something from last year's playoffs. You see it a lot, right? Like where a team loses that one gut-wrenching game. I'm not saying that was that. It was the first round. But there's always like that pivotal moment where like they have that loss, and that's what is the catalyst for something to change. So I'm kind of feeling like that could be the case for Winnipeg, because they haven't done anything to really be bad. We just aren't sure about them, and I feel like no one wants to like give them the credit they deserve because they just aren't ready to commit to them. But that's my soapbox for Winnipeg. What I want to ask you guys about now is a major difference that you have is Ryan has, obviously, because we look at what we just talked about with his list, he has Washington in his top 4. Meanwhile, Michael, like you talked about, you have them in the bottom. You have them literally at 8. So how are we this different, I guess? What is your argument, Ryan, for Washington that you aren't on board with, Michael?
Yeah, again, mine comes down to their center depth and even their defense. Like you got John Carlson, then you've got, he's playing with Rasmus Sandin, who I'm not a huge fan of. Just, I've seen him a lot in Toronto. And then, Jacob Chikrin's there on their second pair. On paper, this is not the best team in the league. And yet, forget about on paper, like they've been playing as the best team. So I should kind of be coming around. Again, I think it's kind of like how Ryan is feeling about Winnipeg, where it's just kind of like slowly he's coming around on the Jets, starting to come around on Capitals, but not really.
Yeah, it's funny, Katie, when you were just talking about the Jets there, it occurred to me, it's like, we do all this prognostication before the playoffs, and there's always upsets, but it's like, wouldn't it be funny if like everybody was just overthinking things and we got a Washington-Winnipeg Stanley Cup final, where it's like, hey, it's just the best teams. And it's funny, I'll disagree with you on Sandin, Mike. I think that was one of the worst trades the Leafs have made in recent years, was letting him go. And I know, they did it for sort of cap space and they got a first rounder back. Ultimately they got a first rounder back in it. But I think he's a sneaky good player, and Chikrin's been awesome for them. And that's sort of lightened the load on John Carlson. I will say, the sort of fly in the ointment with Washington is some of their best producers are on like wicked shooting percentage runs, right? Like Protas, I think Wilson and Ovechkin, they were all last time I checked kind of between like 19 and 21%. And that's not typically sustainable. Having said that, they're getting really goaltending as well, really good goaltending as well. So their PDO is very high, which is obviously not supposed to be sustainable either. But it's like, what if it is? Like, it's hard to shut down Ovechkin. It's hard to shut down Tom Wilson in the playoffs. Alexi Protas is also really big and skilled. So you think about their path right now, it's going to be one of the easier paths. They're going to get a wild card team that like scratched and clawed to get that final spot. And then they're going to get most likely the winner of Carolina, New Jersey, 2 teams that aren't as good as we thought they would be at the beginning of the year.
They're going to get the hottest team arguably going into the playoffs, though, because, if it is Montreal or if it is, Columbus, it means they have to be on a heater just to get in there. It scares me being the number 1 seed. I know it should be like the prize to get the top seed and you get that wild card team that you're playing against. But how many times have we seen that number 1 seed just, go out early in the first round? Like it happens, probably doesn't happen more than it doesn't happen, but it seems like it happens a lot. That's what's got me worried. And if they have to play the Rangers, I honestly think the Rangers are going to beat them. Like it just seems like they've got first round exit written all over them. I don't know. Well, I'll probably be wrong about this, and then everyone can remind me about it like for the next 12 months.
Yes.
I was actually going to put the Rangers on my list this week, and then they lost 2 games in a row that they absolutely needed to win. So now I'm kind of like, I think they might be cooked.
They're giving cooked vibes. And even just
energy.
when you're watching them, like whether they win the game or not, you're just like, I'm so unexcited about this. Like if they even get in, I'm like, I don't even know if I want it anymore. I thought I did because of Shesterkin, but now I'm just like, no, I don't even. This is such a milquetoast team right now. I'd rather get a hot young team that's got something to prove and see what happens. All right, well, let's do some follow-ups. We obviously talked a lot about that. And for the record, both of you still have Florida at the top. Then you've got Dallas and Colorado in some fashion. So top 3 teams, still very much consistent as they probably should be. We've seen a lot from them. But let's do some follow-ups. So we talked a little bit about Toronto. You guys have them in very different places. But regardless of that, they've got nice back-to-back wins coming into this discussion. So Woll had 38 saves in the win over Colorado. Stolarz had 27 saves in the win over the Rangers. Who would be the starting goalie for game 1 of the playoffs if you had to choose right now for Toronto?
I would go Joseph Woll. He's been good in the playoffs for them before. I mean, granted, a very small sample size. But I was actually thinking about this last night, and would it not be bold if Coach Craig Berube basically said to Woll and Anthony Stolarz, like, okay, win and you play the next game? Like, we haven't seen
bold. That's how it should be.
But in the playoffs, I mean, like, we haven't seen like many teams, especially many contenders, that have had the opportunity to bounce between the two. But you think about that war of attrition that is the postseason. It would be kind of intriguing to see, as long as one guy didn't have to sit out for, like a week and a half, because then they get rusty. But hey, you do what you have to. But I just think that Joseph Woll is playing better right now in general. Stolarz coming off that knee injury, has had some struggles. I think you have to go with the hot hand.
Yeah, upside wise, Woll, I think he's got a greater upside than Stolarz. We saw, like Ryan you mentioned it in last year's playoffs, like when they turned the net over from Ilya Samsonov to Joseph Woll, it was a drastic change with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they clawed back in that series where they were missing so many players from, Matthews to Nylander, and, Marner was basically MIA. And if not for an injury at the end of game 6, where Woll had to miss a pivotal game 7, the Leafs pretty much probably could have won that series. And maybe we're talking about a lengthy run that they went on. Who knows? Because of how well Woll was playing, and they started getting all their players back as well. So I'm with you. Woll gets the start for me in game 1. The only thing is he's already exceeded how many games he's played in the NHL this year. Like, he's already set career highs in games played and wins and all that. So I do worry about the fact that he doesn't stay healthy. I don't know if he's got it in him to go on a long run without having to share the net. And like you said, if they do have to kind of bounce between the two, what's the last time that actually happened? Was that Carolina when we saw
when you actually could do it just because you were choosing to do it versus just having to go to somewhere else,
Boston,
right?
they didn't go to Allmark last year, did they? I think it was all Swayman.
That's a good question.
Boston
probably would have been the last team that could do it, but it's very rare to see a team make a deep run and use multiple goalies unless there's an injury, or unless you get like a Matt Murray, Marc-Andre Fleury situation.
Yeah, but it's usually you're kind of like you're making that decision because one guy is just not playing well.
Yeah,
you're almost kind of saying like, fine, win and you're in, but also we have no issue with going to the other guy. Yeah, it would be interesting.
Exactly. It's like
I don't know. Berube seems so old school that I can't see him doing that. It's always kind of like, I got to have one goalie, and that's all I got.
Yeah.
Do you guys think that Toronto heading into the playoffs would probably be the strongest tandem, though, in terms of goalie options?
I mean, probably. Like, unless, ironically, like Shesterkin and Jonathan Quick is pretty good in New York, but they might not get in.
Right.
I would say, too, Washington, Logan Thompson's playing incredible. Charlie Lindgren was their MVP last season.
They both got extensions.
So I'd be pretty happy if I was the Caps as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about the Edmonton Oilers. So obviously, we do have this kind of cloud hanging over because we saw in the game McDavid with the injury, he didn't return. Skinner getting pulled, probably concussion protocol, but again, those are huge pieces. So it, of course, is going to impact the way you think about that team. But digging a little deeper, we saw Evander Kane getting back out on the ice. We know that they have Trent Frederic also as an option. So how would those types of additions, not like let's just act like McDavid and Skinner are going to be okay for this moment. How would those additions change the complexion of the Oilers team that we could see in the playoffs?
Yeah, well, last year's Oilers team was so physical. I think we kind of forget like a lot of the players they missed or lost last year. Really kind of changed. Like it's a slower team. It's not as physical a team. And when you look at even Leon Draisaitl in the season he's having, like, you look at who he's played with. Fine, he's paired with McDavid at times and Nugent Hopkins at times because they put those three guys together, or even Hyman. But for the most part, he's been with like Victor Arvidsson and Podkolzin, and then even Jeff Skinner. Like they need an injection of a guy that can actually score. And Evander Kane, he's been hurt, obviously, but at his best, he's like a 30-goal scorer who can really play physical and add an element that the Oilers are missing. So I think it'd be huge. And Frederic is more or less the same. Obviously, he's not going to be a second line winger for you, probably. He's going to be more of a bottom six guy. But again, that physical element in the playoffs would be huge.
Yeah. I mean, you think too, like, let's just assume they're playing Los Angeles in the first round because it's like practically a mathematical
I don't think it's
certainty.
happen.
Yeah.
But the Kings have always been a heavy team, and I think that you're going to need to combat that. The Kings are going to want it to be kind of low scoring. You're going to have to grind it out. What's interesting to me is that I don't think this is necessarily a case of just dropping a couple of your fourth liners and putting Kane and Frederic in, because if you think about Edmonton's bottom six, you have some very valuable penalty killers there. Like you think about how important Connor Brown was to the penalty kill, especially in the final last year. Like Connor Brown was awesome in the Stanley Cup final. And you think about Matthias Janmark, how important he was, even Adam Henrique. So, I kind of wondered, like, does that mean, like, does Jeff Skinner, who has been playing better of late, like, does he get bumped out of the lineup? Right? Or, I mean, like, Max Jones is an easy one, but if you need two slots, like, who else are you taking out from that bottom six to bring those guys in? I think it's going to be some interesting decision making for Coach Chris Knobloch, assuming everybody is healthy.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about another first round matchup that is feeling. I mean, I think this one maybe even is more of a lock than the LA Edmonton matchup. That would be the Avalanche and the Dallas Stars. So the recent news coming out about Miro Heiskanen and the realistic possibility that he will not be available for round one of the playoffs. How does this change the way that who would you have picked with him in? And does this change that dramatically, I guess, in terms of his involvement and what could change the series?
Yeah. It makes me so nervous because not only because we just closed a magazine that, we had Dallas as our Stanley Cup winner and, we had a big Mikko Rantanen feature as well.
Curse of the hockey news.
Totally curse of the hockey news.
Sorry, everyone.
Yeah, but it does make me nervous. I mean, I watched Dallas play Tampa Bay last night and they lost in a shootout. But Tampa Bay is a fantastic team. Like Tampa Bay is the type of team that you play in the second, third round, even in the Stanley Cup final. So I thought it was a good test for Dallas. And, they kept up, obviously, and they had their chances to win. Thomas Harley has been amazing. But I do worry that when you have a clash of the Titans, as you will with, Colorado, Dallas, not having your best defenseman is really rough.
Yeah, let's face it. Even with Heiskanen in the lineup, that's not like, I don't even know if Dallas is necessarily an overwhelming favorite in that series. Like it almost is a off.
Yeah.
Yeah. With how good Colorado made the roster at the deadline. I think Brock Nelson was a huge pickup. I think, this is a team that even, Marty Nashis has looked so good since joining them. There really isn't any holes. And I'm becoming more and more impressed with Mackenzie Blackwood the more I see him. Like, fine, they lost against the Toronto Maple Leafs, but they lost on a goal where the puck goes off an official and bounces to
we'll get to that.
a relief player. Yeah, like Lorenz gets the luckiest goal of his life. And basically,
It was a nice
Colorado
shot.
was dominating the entire time. Like, it was a Joseph Wall, like, putting on a show for them to win. So that Colorado team is dangerous. And now if they're playing a Dallas team that has all the offensive weapons you could want, has Jake Ottinger and Ned, and still has a Thomas Harley, as Ryan mentioned, taking away a Heiskanen could be the difference between them winning and losing.
Yeah, it's a scary thing. I already felt like Colorado was certainly creeping towards being very much even, if not maybe slightly favored in that, especially when you consider the way that they're playing right now. And we just talked about this, how scary it is when a team just shows up for round one when they're on a bit of a heater. And it does feel like Colorado might be able to keep that momentum going. Things are clicking. They have Manson, who's now going to be out for the next 3 to 4 weeks. I know Sam Girard was out. See what happens with him. But regardless, they have their number one guy and Dallas doesn't. So certainly that is a game changer. All right, real quick, let's talk about a team that is trying to heat up, and they do this every year. You guys know the movie Ice Age? When the sloth goes out, they do this every year. This is what the Islanders do, in my opinion. Every year they make this run and they get close and the fans get excited and whatever happens, but they're 6-3-1 in their last 10. They are right back in the mix for wild card 2. Do we buy them as a real threat to earn that spot?
I don't think so. That being said, like, they beat Florida, Pittsburgh, and Montreal to go on this little win streak. But you look ahead to their upcoming schedule there, Katie. They got Calgary, Columbus, Vancouver. All three teams are all battling for wild card spots. So they're going to be motivated. And then even after that, like, it doesn't get any easier. They got they played Tampa twice. They got Carolina. They're playing basically either playoff teams or teams that are trying to get into the playoffs. So
not good.
I don't see it happening.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like the next 6 games are really going to tell the tale. But I mean, shout out to the Islanders for playing well. Now, Sorokin is giving them a chance to win every game. I think in the past 5, he has not given up more than 3 goals in any game, and he's only given up 2 in several of those. Bo Horvat has been great. Noah Dobson's playing better. And very interesting because they don't have Matt Barzal in the lineup. So they're coming together. It's just a matter of, can they sustain this? And can they leapfrog teams? Because they're not in a wild card spot right now. So they have work to do, but they are very close.
If you guys had to, just between the two teams, pick one that you feel like better vibes about, or you feel like might actually make a better push, would you pick the Islanders or the Rangers?
I'm going Rangers.
Vibes-wise, I'd take the Islanders. Maybe not on paper, but if we're talking vibes, like, the Islanders are they feel like they're in a much better headspace right now.
Yeah, there's just so much negativity surrounding the Rangers that it's like so hard to just feel good. I mean, they still are very much in the mix when you look at the numbers, but it just doesn't, like, every time they have a chance to, like, take the step and, like, make you think they're really serious about taking it, they do the opposite. And that's why it's just been so hard to get on board with them. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about a race that we haven't talked about as much lately, but it's always heating up, the Calder conversation. So we've got the 3 names that kind of feel like these are the 3. Celebrini, 21 goals, 50 points. I did these yesterday, so this math might be slightly off, but we've got Celebrini with the goals. Hudson's got the assists. And then obviously you've got Wolf with 22 wins. He's got an incredible save percentage. Carrying Calgary, and if they make the playoffs, he's a huge part of it because they don't score that much. So who is your front runner right now for this Calder race?
I mean, right now, I would say Dustin Wolf, especially if Calgary gets a wild card spot. And it's funny because the Calders the one award where usually making the playoffs has no bearing on it. But if you look at the Flames, like they have one of the worst offenses in the Western Conference,
Yes.
and yet they're still in the mix. And Wolf has been a huge part of that. So I think that's big for him. And then, of course, you look at Lane Hutson and his impact in Montreal. If Montreal gets a wild card spot, then I think that bodes well for him too. At the same time, I love Celebrini, and he's the most complete player in the rookie class. So any of them could win, but if Calgary makes the playoffs, I think it'll be Wolf.
Yeah, it really is such a weird Calder race because we've got three different positions, obviously. Right? We got a center, we got a defenseman, and we got a goalie. So how do you compare the three? And Ryan, you make a great point about, if Montreal makes the playoffs, then maybe it's Hudson. If Calgary makes the playoffs, maybe it's Wolf.
Yeah.
I'm leaning towards Hudson. What he's doing on the back end is really impressive. Like he's leading all rookies in scoring right now, 53 points in 68 games. Did you guys see that goal he scored the other night where he basically it like squint and it looks like Cale Makar? And he's got me so excited about just what the future looks like in Montreal with him just getting better and better. So for me right now, I've got Hudson has got the slight edge, and I really kind of hope Montreal makes a push for the playoffs because it's been fun. Like I love it when a team is just well ahead of whatever we kind of say in terms of their rebuild. Like it looked like Montreal was still another 2 years away. And if they sneak in this year, wow, what a blow that would be to like a team like Buffalo and even Detroit.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Well, let's talk a little bit about the future because we've got some Hobey Baker nominees that were recently announced. So the top 10 was listed. So we've got Zeev Boyum from Denver, Jack Devine from Denver, Aiden Fink from Penn State. You got Matt Godowski at Army, Isaac Howard at Michigan State, Ryan Leonard at BC. Obviously, we know all about him. Arton Martino at Clarkson, Liam McClinsky for Holy Cross, getting an Atlantic hockey team in there, Jimmy Snuggerud at Minnesota, and Alex Tracy at Minnesota State. So every single name is a name that if you know anything or watch any college hockey, you've heard those names a lot. They're all excellent players. That's why they're in the top 10. But there's always like kind of that feeling of who really is going to be in the finalists category. So Ryan, start us off. I want to know who are your picks that are just kind of like ahead of the game and should be in the top 3.
Yeah, so I'm going to go Ryan Leonard, number 1. Boston College had been the number 1 team a lot of the year. They kind of ping pong back and forth with Michigan State. But Ryan Leonard, I mean, he's such an impressive player. And, we almost assume that he's going to go straight to the Capitals as soon as the Eagles are done this season. He's such a driver for that Boston College team. And, by a similar measure, Isaac Howard having such a tremendous year for Michigan State, and the Spartans have been the other number 1 team in the nation. For number 3, I went Jimmy Snuggerud with Minnesota because his production's great. And, the Hobey Baker is interesting because it's not just like a straight up MVP. Yeah. There's also like an off ice component, like being a good person. And I do think the fact that Snuggerud could have left for the NHL and did not works in his favor. Like he wanted to win a title with the Gophers. He told the Blues that, and they were like, hey, that's great. Go back for another year. So I think voters will be very impressed by that, and that might be a factor. I will say, just to finish up, I would not be surprised if like McClinsky or Godowski got a lot of votes simply because, you kind of spread the conference love and them being in Atlantic hockey and having such great seasons as they did. I wouldn't be surprised if they would be dark horses, but those are my top 3.
Interesting. I don't watch nearly enough college hockey to kind of get into a serious debate about this. I'm just going to say that seeing Ryan Leonard's name there is very triggering because of how well he played at the World Juniors. And it just it infuriated me to no end being a Team Canada fan. Interesting point, though, like Washington, imagine getting Ryan Leonard for your playoff run.
So interesting.
And again, I know he's coming straight out of college, but if there's a guy that I would trust for big minutes in the playoffs, without having played pro hockey, it's Ryan Leonard, because it just seems like even he could have been playing this full season and we probably would have been talking about him as a Calder candidate. I think that's how ready he is for the NHL. And his game is built for the playoffs. Let's face it. Like, I think that's why he's so effective at like a World Juniors, obviously. So again, just seeing that name, it just kind of like sends chills down my spine, because again, you love to hate him and mostly you just love, I hate him as a player just because, he does such damage to the teams I love.
Yeah, I like it. No, Ryan, I agree with yours. I'm with you on Leonard. I'm with you on Howard. The one that I think of that is a name we hear a lot too in the whole circuit, and maybe because he's a defenseman, would be someone that would be interesting for them, would be Zeev Buium. Just getting him in the mix. I know Denver has taken a little bit of a step back in terms of the dominant powerhouse that they were.
Yeah.
Probably his last year. But it would just maybe purely based on the defensive aspect, they might consider throwing him a bone. But I like I mean, I think it's going to be Leonard or Howard regardless in terms of who wins it. So third guy is kind of just, we'll see. All right, well, listen up, hockey players. If you want to be on that Hobey Baker list someday, you don't need to drop a fortune on sticks when you can snag a pro-level composite stick at Stix.com. That's Stix.com. So make sure you go on there and check all of them out. All right, rapid fire. Fun time of the year here in college basketball world. March Madness is underway. There's just wall-to-wall games. It's literally insane. Like, the games don't even end till like 2 a.m. Like, you just can't stop with the basketball. But every year we always want to see who's going to be that Cinderella story team, the 16 or 15 team that just goes on a run. So which NHL team right now would be the best Cinderella story to shock the world and make a run?
I'm going Montreal, and this is a Montreal team, or Montreal has a history of doing this, obviously, in that all Canadian division during the lockout year, or sorry, the COVID year. They unexpectedly made the Stanley Cup final and lost to Tampa, and Samuel Montembeault, who's playing like his best hockey of the year, showing why he was picked for the Four Nations. I think in that stat that Ryan really likes, goals above expected, I think he's top 5 right now. So
wow.
Yeah, for me, it's the Montreal Canadiens.
I like it.
Yeah, that's a great pick. That was one I was thinking. The other one I'm thinking is Calgary. We talked about Dustin Wolf. Like, imagine if he just went on a playoff heater. Obviously, he's got the history behind him in terms of his junior career. But also, like, the Flames, they've got those guys like Nazem Kadri and Blake Coleman that are playoff guys. So wouldn't that be something if Calgary got a wild card spot and then, knocked off a Stanley Cup contender in the first round?
Yeah, it would be. And I mean, again, this is, it adds to it in the fact that these are both teams who, I mean, Calgary in particular, we had slated at one point to potentially be in the mix for a lottery pick, like a top pick in the draft lottery. Like, we thought they were going to be bad. And now we're talking about they could be our Cinderella team. So that certainly is most of the criteria that you need. All right. Well, we had lots of GM meetings, lots of stuff coming out from those. But one thing that came out was that Gary Bettman said the playoff format is not changing. So are you glad because you like the current format, or are you sad because you want to go back to the 1 versus 8? What do we think?
Sad. I don't know why he loves it so much.
Nobody likes it.
Yeah.
Like saving money on travel.
Is it like maybe like TV ratings or something because you're getting all these rivals? I don't know, but I just feel like it's time to mix it up, to further reward teams that play well in the regular season. So yeah, I would prefer 1 to 8. Let's just give it a shot. Give it a shot again. It's been a while.
Come on, please.
I'll play devil's advocate. I'm glad he's choosing this, and I see the reason, like the rationale beyond just like the travel is easier in the first round. How many times has Toronto played Boston? And I don't know if we get that same rivalry now between the two teams if there's not the current format that we have for this playoff format. So we're going to see Edmonton and LA again. We're kind of just rolling our eyes and we're like, again, we got to see those two teams, but maybe we get some passion, we get some hate between the two franchises. Maybe this is kind of creating a Edmonton LA rivalry, or at least that's what the hope is. So, I see the rationale. I'm kind of with you though, Ryan and Katie. I like to maybe change it up as well.
Yeah. I mean, the rivalry thing is the best point. When I worked in Florida, Joel Quenneville told me that you cannot have a rivalry with a team unless you have had a big playoff series against them. And that is so true. But at the same time, it's very hard when you're getting into these second and third rounds and you have these teams that, pull off this, like two teams that you could see being genuine conference final contenders. And one of them's already gone because I think it's watering down the quality somewhat of the later rounds where it matters more and more as you go. But you can make great arguments for both because we have certainly gotten some crazy good rivalries out of it. All right, well, let's talk about the New York Rangers. They are one of three teams that next year will be their Centennial season. So they released their logo, and people online are really not excited about it. Did you see the logo, and are you a yay or a nay for the Rangers logo?
I will say this. I don't have any problem with it. I just have a problem with anniversary logos in general.
Okay.
Because I don't really... my whole thing is like with any kind of logo, it's like, can I rock it on a hat? And it's like, you never would, right? I would say the only one that's like kind of okay is like the Caps 50th one that they wear on the jersey. I'm like, okay, that's fine on the jersey, but it's like, I don't care about just a big number, right? It doesn't matter what the number is. It's just like, it's just a big number. Like there's no graphic interest to it. So I don't think the Rangers one is bad. I think it just is an anniversary logo, which is destined to be somewhere small on a jersey.
Okay.
Yeah. For those who haven't seen it, it's just the giant font of 100, like the 1 and a 0, and then like the number. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know what the critics are saying, but I don't like it. I think it's busy. We get it. It's a Centennial logo. Do you have to put 100 there?
It just felt so like it felt like a Microsoft Paint, whatever that is. Like it just felt like so like we are having a 100th anniversary. Here is the number 100 and the Rangers. Like I would have had a little more fun with it. I feel like there's no rules. Like have fun with it. You don't have to make it boring, but they did.
I would have put the Statue of Liberty, although it seems like France has taken that one back, so maybe that you can't do that anymore.
The painting was a gift, Todd. I'm taking it with me. All right. Well, Josh Morrissey becomes the top scorer among defensemen in the Jets 2.0 history, passing Dustin Byfuglien. Is he a better blue liner for Winnipeg than Byfuglien was?
Ooh, that's a good question. A completely different defenseman.
Yeah. Very.
But Byfuglien's basically... I don't even know how this guy's career has gone because he was a great forward, won a Stanley Cup, and then became even better defenseman. So kind of like Brent Burns, I guess, to that effect, where it's just amazing how guys can switch like that and be effective. I would say Byfuglien's better. He was so strong, so good. I wish he had played longer into his career. It really was kind of a travesty that he ended self-imposed like retirement before his playing career was necessarily done. But Big Buff, he just did so many things beyond just the goals and points.
Yeah, the man loves ice fishing. Can't take that away from him.
And he does not like getting in shape for hockey apparently either.
Yeah, he was a unicorn.
That's a big man.
It's tough because like they're different eras. Like Josh Morrissey is so good for this era. But I think I'll probably go Buff because Buff could also play in this era. Not that Josh Morrissey couldn't have succeeded, 10 years ago. But, I mean, there was nobody like Dustin Byfuglien. So I'll go with him.
Who's the closest defenseman like a Byfuglien right now? Is there one that plays like he... Like I just remember that one clip where he like pulled two guys out of a scrum and he basically...
That was
it was just insane the strength that this guy had. I don't know if there's a defenseman like Chara would be the next closest guy, right?
Probably. Totally. Yeah. There's just like you said, you're unicorns. They're unicorns, and with the way that the game has changed, like I just feel like they're being phased out in some capacity, but they were awesome and I love it. And I do think that Byfuglien could be impactful even now. I would choose him as well. All right. Well, let's talk about another unicorn. Alex Ovechkin, 7 goals away from breaking Gretzky's 894 all-time goals record. He has 13 games to do it. It is starting to get a little nerve-wracking. I'm a little nervous. We always go back and forth, but do we think that he will need all 13 games to get this done if he is going to do it? Or do you think maybe he could have some games to spare?
I think he'll have one game to spare. I think he'll do it in the second last game of the season, and then he can sit out the final game of the season just to get rested up for the playoffs a bit.
They played Chicago, so maybe how many goals do you think he'll score against Chicago, Ryan?
Well, that should be a 2 or
3.
2 to 3.
Although they're not going to have to pull their goalie because
that's the problem. That's been a thing lately.
I would personally love to see him do it in the final game, because in the final game, Katie, who does he play? The Pittsburgh Penguins.
Oh my goodness!
It would be great to see not only Wayne Gretzky on hand for that game. It's in Pittsburgh, but also Sidney Crosby, who's been his longtime sort of rival, and they've been like basically chained at the hip. To congratulate Alex Ovechkin on setting the record. And
Crosby would handle it so well, and it would be awesome. And Crosby's got his old records that he's chasing.
It would make for a great moment, honestly.
Lemieux would probably be around. I mean, just a great night full of great hockey people. That would be very cool. And insanely nerve-wracking, especially if he did it in like the third period. People would be dying.
It should be an empty net goal too, just because of
anticlimactic end to a chase of all time if it didn't happen. Yeah. Oh, all right. Good stuff, guys. Well, as always, thanks for the top 8 contenders. And everybody, make sure to follow us on social media. Chime in. Tell us if we're right or wrong. What do you think? We'll have that every Friday as we get down to the final race for the playoffs. But that does it for this episode of the Hockey News Big Show. I'm Katie Gaus. You got Michael Traikos and Ryan Kennedy. And that's it. We'll see you guys next time.